name is Dominic Dorsey. I'm a community organizer and the founder of Don't Sleep. So Don't Sleep actually is an acronym, and some people know that and some people don't. It stands for Deconstructing Oppression Now Through Solidarity, Liberation, Equity, Empowerment, and Perseverance. It actually came about just trying to see how we can get different communities to work together in terms of solidarity to achieve a common goal. One of the first actual events that I organized here in the city around the Black Lives Matter movement was trying to get people to come together for Tamir Rice. We went down to the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, got some folks together to march and to chant and to actually try to come up with some tangible solutions in terms of Black Lives Matter in Indianapolis, and 15 people showed up. Fast forward a month, and then the Religious Freedom Restoration Act happened, and there was an entire LGBTQIA community that came together to voice their concerns, to push back against Mike Pence and the legislation, and I was one of the organizers for that event. We get down to the State House lawn and it's 3,000 people. So at the culmination of that, I'm just thinking, how can we get this 3,000 people who are passionate activists, to people who care about people, to be as passionate about Black Lives Matter? How can we get those 15 people that came to that Tamir Rice march to come to a rally for RFRA? Because there's some commonalities, and oppression is not a concept that's mutually exclusive. We can get a whole lot more accomplished together. It's not about numbers, it's about caring. So Don't Sleep is really about not fitting one particular agenda, but looking at all the agendas and the systems of oppression and how we can deconstruct those as a community and as a city. So Don't Sleep pretty much does whatever's necessary in that particular time. A lot of the events that we do, like the Black Business Block Party and Liberation Weekend and all that stuff that happens in the first weekend in August, that's really a three-pronged approach to use arts and activism as a combination to raise money for national and local organizations. So we give money to organizations like Grow Incorporated. We gave money to organizations like Bloom Project, but we also sent money down to Flint and helped to repair homes through the Green for All initiative. Well, we gave money this past year to the Bail Project to help individuals who are incarcerated that can't make bail. But we used current events. We use the brilliant artists here in Indianapolis that do poetry and they do rap music and they do theater, and used all of that and combined that effort to really present it in a way for people who don't understand some of these issues that we're experiencing with food insecurity or mass incarceration or education, domestic violence. Any of those issues of anti-Blackness that are impacting us, we display through an event called The Wake. And the whole sole purpose is to educate the community while also raising money to support these other organizations that are doing fantastic work. Then we always bring in a prolific speaker from the community, typically on a national scale. We brought in individuals like Elle Hearns, who is the CEO and the founder of the Marsha P. Johnson Institute. We brought in Leslie Mack last year, who invented and one of the co-founders of the Safety Pin Box. We bring in people to challenge the community and think about what it means to fight for solidarity, what it means to try to attain freedom. And then the block party itself is really, beyond an opportunity to support Black-owned businesses and circulate the Black dollar, to encourage economic development within the Black community, to encourage entrepreneurism. It's an opportunity to get together like a family reunion. Again, to be carefree and Black on a Sunday and just enjoy each other's company, eat food, hang out with folks you haven't seen in a minute, love on one another. Those are important. The discussion series events that we do are always centered around a movie that's coming out that has a theme that we need to address, around figures that we probably don't talk about. So no pun intended, we did one with Hidden Figures. We did another one with Birth of a Nation, talking about Nat Turner. People don't talk about Nat Turner. What does it mean to, actually fight for liberation? We always talk about slavery, but there were people that actually fought for their freedom. The Nat Turner Rebellion was the first and only a successful slave rebellion in the United States, and they don't talk about it. It took this movie before it became national attention. So we take movies like that to have a discussion about what does that legacy mean for us. Everything that we do, again, is to be proactive and not necessarily reactive. I think that activism, whether it's purely online or whether it's street activism, not by and large, but in a lot of spaces it becomes reactive. A lot of these things, these problems, it happen in cycles. We expect it, we know it's gonna happen. We may not know that it's gonna happen to us. We may not expect that it happens to somebody who's unarmed or somebody who's from our community, but we know these problems exist. What can we do to get ahead of it? We know that there are food deserts. What can we do to prepare people to be able to eat and sustain themselves and sustain their families without depending on the government, without depending on the city to step in for us? How can we pour into each other without waiting on somebody else to come and save us? That's what we're working on. We're working on how can we proactively address our own issues? How can we proactively save ourselves so that we're not waiting for somebody else to save us? Arming ourselves intellectually, economically, physically, and spiritually. That's the movement. That should be the goal. It's always about the goal. It's always about the end result. Every time we do any type of a disruption, a march, or anything, it's about what's the ask. So a march is a good visual representation. Whenever we talk about Black History Month, and we just ended Black History Month, they talk about Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King, when he was sitting in a Birmingham jail and he wrote his letter, he talked about how you dramatize a situation to the point where it can't be ignored anymore. If you've got 3,000 plus people marching through the streets, not just for the sake of marching, but disrupting traffic, making people stop their day to wonder why are all these people gathered together, whether they have to Google it, whether they have to ask somebody who's marching, what have you, you're raising awareness, you're elevating the consciousness. Beyond that, what's the ask? So if we're gonna march to something, and we're gonna march with something, with a goal of something becoming achieved. So we're marching to draw attention to what? This legislation that we want to, address, or we want to stop, or legislation that we want to push, or if there's an issue of police brutality, or if there is any particular situation or injustice in the city. Could be nationwide. Marching isn't the only thing that we do. Sometimes it's petitions, sometimes it's other activities in the community. One of the most liberating things that you could ever do is do things for yourself. So marching is something I think that a lot of people don't really see the concept behind because they see it from the outside looking in, but there's always a purpose. And as long as you have a purpose and a goal in mind, it's something that you want to achieve through that march, it has good results. It's interesting you say that I started this whole Be More Black hashtag movement, and I took it and carried it over into my work and my job, and people are uncomfortable with it. You see, a 6-foot black man walking around with a shirt that says Be More Black surrounded by suits. It makes them think what's about to happen is something about to pop off. The notion behind, not tailoring your blackness to the comfort of others is just the juxtaposition of it. Nobody else is shrinking themselves and making themselves small for our comfort. I can't be responsible for anybody else's comfort but my own. So when I go into a space, whether it's, the ethnicity that's displayed through my dress, through my hair, the African American vernacular English that I use, whatever it is that makes other people feel uncomfortable, that's their bias, that's their racism showing itself, that's their expectation and Eurocentric approach to looking at situations. But if we're truly in or trying to work towards a post-racial society, if we're truly in this melting pot, then they need to accept me from where I'm coming from because I'm presenting a certain level of intellect that comes from, being raised on the east side of Indianapolis, that comes from having a majority friend group that's black or brown or, people of color, that I have experiences that have made me who I am. That's part of what got me to the dance. That's part of what's going to get me through the show. That's part of what's going to get me to, that end result that everybody is working towards. Diversity is not just about looking at the table and making sure that you have all those boxes checked. It's about valuing the people who are coming to the table and their experiences and everything that they come with. So when people say, well, I am being black. Black is not a monolith. I'm not saying that everybody has to be the same way. It's not about whether or not you pull your pants up, whether or not you twerk or not. It's about saying, I love, honor, and cherish and respect you as a black woman. I respect you as a black man. And there's not one set way to do it. You don't have to do it in a suit and tie in order for me to respect you. You can also be doing it when you got on, an extra long tee. If you're sagging, if you got on a hoodie, I respect you the same way. Blackness can be defined however we choose to do so. Just don't feel like you got to turn down your blackness to make other people feel comfortable. If you ever feel like you had to change the way you talk, change the way you dress, change the way that you interact with people just to be accepted, that may be something to consider. It may be time to be more black. I think that that's a good question in terms of whether or not somebody can be racist towards their own people. I think what happens is that we get into this whole thing about respectability, what the dominant culture will respect, and use that as an example or use that as a benchmark or a litmus test as to whether or not they're worthy of engagement, or whether or not we can be proud of them. I remember, when Iverson came out and they were talking about, the way he wore his braids and the way that he wore his pants or what have you, it wasn't the norm that they were used to. And it wasn't because they couldn't appreciate that he was a good ball player. It wasn't that they couldn't appreciate that he had style, he had swag. It's about what are other people going to think about him as he represents the black community. He's just representing himself. We all represent ourselves. Without question, if you are black presenting, you are a black person. I give that to people off the top. But on the same token, I'm not going to say you make us look bad by the way that you dress. If you feel comfortable, if you feel confident, more power to you. Blessings, you know what I mean? But I'm not going to give more respect to somebody who's wearing a suit than I am to somebody who's got on a jersey and some sneakers and they got their hat cocked, what have you. You know what I mean? You respect them because they're a human being that's worthy of respect. I think that we get into this whole mindset of what other people are thinking about us, and we police each other in the way that we talk, the way that we dress, the way that we interact with each other. Just approach each other with love, man. That's all that's necessary. It's funny because, and I say this, as a straight, cisgender, married black man, I can't speak for the LGBTQ community in saying that I'm a member any other way than as an ally. But I will say that a lot of the same issues that we face in terms of policing each other and our behavior, they experience too. There's a lot of letters within the LGBTQIA that, there's not necessarily infighting, but they don't have the same level of love and respect that is, that many people may assume. Trans folks aren't treated the same way that, the lesbian and gay individuals within the community are. There's a lot of disrespect towards, bisexual individuals, and people want them to present in a certain way, or they feel like somebody may be too effeminate, or they may be doing too much, or what have you. I think that everybody has to remember that I personally, as an individual, no matter what my identity is or what community I represent, I'm not the benchmark for everybody else's behavior. People are going to be how they're going to be. And as long as their behavior is not problematic or hurting anybody, as long as it's, if they don't sign my check on the front or the back, what is it hurting me to love and support them? As far as what we need to get to that next place, even when we talk about the juxtaposition of the black community and the LGBTQIA community, folks need to remember that there are individuals who are both. And I think that that's really hard for a lot of people. They want to separate and say, well, they're gay. Well, yeah, they're gay and they're also black. And sometimes they may be gay, black, and a woman, so they're oppressed 3 times. How do we still support them with the same love? If we say that we are pro-black, if we say that we are unapologetically black, I unapologetically support and protect them the same way that I do any of my other black brothers and sisters and siblings. We really just have to get to a point where we're operating from a place of love as opposed to hate, as opposed to indifference, as opposed to judgment. Nobody wants to be judged, nobody wants to think less of, but we constantly look for other people to do that too. I think a lot of that is born out of, slavery. We saw freedom through the eye of the person who oppressed us, so we thought in order to be free, we had to be like them and keep our foot on the neck of somebody else. So we're always looking to keep our foot on the neck of somebody else, trying to get higher up on that ladder rung. When in the process, we just created this at each other's throats mentality. In order to break those chains, in order to get to what freedom really looks like, we need to be trying to figure out how to not look down on people to judge them, but look down on them to help them up. And when we all get to this level, instead of being like this, that's when freedom starts. That's what Don't Sleep is about. I don't see myself as a leader. I see myself as a servant. I see myself as someone who's answering the call. I don't like spotlight, honestly. I step up when I feel like I need to step up, or I feel like nobody else is doing it. But I'm also trying to be very intentional about bringing along other, like-minded individuals, younger people with bigger and better and brighter ideas than myself. People like, Raven Rigel, people like Aisha Harris, people like Herbert Mutombo, even people who are older than me, folks like Tony Davis, folks like, Satchuel Cole, folks like, Brandon Randall, like all these people who essentially are doing great work in the city, either with or apart from Don't Sleep. it's important to share that wealth. It's important to share that responsibility. It's important to acknowledge folks like, Indy 10, Black Lives Matter. It's important to recognize folks like Tatiana Rebel. It's important to recognize that there's a lot of voices and a lot of leaders, so to speak, in the city, and a lot of people that don't recognize their leadership potential. I think that the movement can only survive when we recognize that we're not, relying upon one leader, but we're leader-full. And that everybody has a role to fulfill, even if it's not standing in front of a microphone, even if it's not walking with a bullhorn. Everybody has a role to play. It's just got to be ready to take that call when it comes. It's very important as a community organizer not to confuse what you do with who you are. Everything that I do for my kids, for them to have a better and a brighter future, put it that way. So when it comes to the end of the day, when I'm pouring out my energy, where I may be organizing here, I may be doing this event, I may be behind the scenes, I really got to go back to my family. When people are plugging into you for energy, the question is always who you plug into to get that energy back. And it's really just being present with my family. It's holding my daughter, it's playing with my son, it's actually being intentional and having conversations with my wife without our cell phones in our hands. It's sharing a family meal. All that's important. You can pour out to the community until you have nothing left. And I think that's why we have so many leaders who are no longer with us, because the community either drained them dry or the state stole them from us. But it's very important that you find some way to negotiate between family time and actually finding time to be yourself and being the social justice warrior that you feel like the situation may call for at any given time. I'm most proud of us. Like I said, I'm Indianapolis born and raised. These issues go deep, way back. Whether we're talking about education or police brutality, like I said, these issues have always been there. But the joke behind Naptown being asleep and Don't Sleep being the name of the organization is to try to wake the city up. Try to make us more socially aware, more socially active. And I won't say that we did it on our own, but I will say that over the course of the past few years that people have been much more socially conscious, much more, ready to listen to one another, much more ready to coalesce. The community that's been built here is beautiful. Like I said, the arts community, the activist community, the politicians, the event coordinators, the journalists, everybody's actually coming together on one accord. We're creating something so beautiful in this resurgence in Naptown, this renaissance that we're in. I'm extremely proud of. So when I say that I believe that we'll win, it's because of what I've seen come up to this point, and we're just getting started. It's going to be something so beautiful when it's done.